I'm really delighted to welcome Sue Iqbal for today's focus on walking well into 2021. Sue's worked extensively in the field of education and she's a director of Forward Partnership. She's a Birmingham-based leadership and life coach. And she's also recently become a grandmother, which is wonderful news. Sue, thank you so much for agreeing to lead our session today, and I'm glad to hand over to you to take us forwards.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you who, just for the privilege really of being in your space, wherever that might be. And, you know, I think I echo really what Sarah said about connection. I think we're all craving connection. So for the time being, it is virtually, but the quality of interactions that I think people are having virtually nowadays, I don't think a year ago we would have ever thought it possible. So I really do appreciate being with you, even in this space, but also because of the opportunities that this space gives us to connect. So thank you. So I just want to start really, I will share some slides in a minute, but just before I begin to do that, I think it's nice to see people's faces and where possible, but I just want to ask a question. If you are walking well in 2021, what does that conjure up for you? Obviously, walking is a metaphor, and I think a really helpful metaphor, because sometimes to access our subconscious thoughts, actually using metaphors is quite a helpful way. So I just wonder if you wanted to pop something into the chat box. Where are you walking at the moment? What would you like to see in your future walk this year? Just pop a few words that come into mind. That's really interesting to see that sort of sense of balance coming up, and purpose and direction are words that I've seen a number of times now. That's really great. Thank you. And that balance. Yeah. Thank you. That's interesting, isn't it? That sense of walking without fear of getting lost. I think that there has been that sense of dis-ease and in our walk over this last year, and not feeling quite where we're going. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen with you and take us into some of that metaphor a bit deeper. During the session, I'm going to share a tool for looking at intentional change, making changes that are within our control. So much of what we've experienced in this last year is outside of our control. But there's a really helpful way of thinking and dealing with the unknown and the uncertain, and that is to focus on what we can control. So really that session, this session is going to help you to just focus on those things that you can control, and where you might want to make some of those intentions that you put there in the chat a bit more of a reality in the year to come. So let me share my screen, and I'm sorry that we'll sort of lose faces when we do this, but if I can take you through this and then we can come back into the whole group. So where are you walking at the moment? Where are your feet falling? What are you seeing as you walk the path that you're on? Some of my experiences, some of the things that I've been seeing and feeling during the last period of time have been these, and I've probably experienced every single one of these at different times. And some of them have been really positive, but quite a lot of them have been quite negative. And I think that sort of sense of roller coaster that we can be on in the midst of this this season, that sense of training ourselves to look at the unexpected joys, the things that we didn't appreciate perhaps before the pandemic, but now we are beginning to see those little things. I had an amazing experience last year where my son and now daughter-in-law had been sort of sent back from Paris, and they ended up living in our garage for, well, that sounds awful, above the garage in our annex. And they ended up living there through the first part of the pandemic, and that brought joys that we have really not expected during this time. But there's been also those seasons of great vulnerability where just not feeling able to feel safe in any way, shape or form. And those things that have been taken away, that we have just experienced, that collective sense of loss, I think, as a nation, but also as individuals. And as Sarah said right at the beginning, that sense of weariness, how long is this going on for? When is it actually going to stop? When is my life going to feel a little less, as it is at the moment, restricted and constrained and uncertain? So that being the backdrop, it's interesting, isn't it? That this picture is one of snow. We didn't know when we were putting this together that we might be having snow today. But hey, where would you like your feet to tread? Some of you had begun to think about that in those words. What would you like your future to be like that is within your control? So I want to introduce you to Richard Boyatzis. Richard Boyatzis is a professor at Case Western Reserve University, and he developed intentional change theory as part of his work on individual and organizational change. He published it in 2006, and he is widely respected as a expert in organizational and individual change, but also in coaching. And I can strongly recommend any of you who are interested in coaching as part of your work, I can strongly recommend his book, Helping People Change. It's a wonderful book, and it really does explain more in more detail the process that I'm going to encourage you with today. Basically, what Boyatzis is based on is positive psychology, and it is the whole sense that when we are made to do things as adults, we will often comply. So we will comply with the restrictions that we're given, but the minute those restrictions are lifted, we won't comply any longer. They don't become our behaviours. They are things that are forced upon us and that we'll happily comply. Also, sometimes when we're working, if our organisation forces change upon us that we really don't buy into, we will just comply with it. We will go along with it. but the minute the situation changes, we will probably stop complying. So it hasn't been sustainable. Richard Boyatzis' theory is all about making change sustainable and helping people to buy into it. It's about seeing something that is greater or more attractive in the future, having a sense of the ideal and moving towards it. And it's, as I said, it's based on positive psychology, and it is saying that the pull towards something that is attractive is much more powerful in sustaining change than something that is a push. So let me just take you through the model very, very briefly. The way it works is, as an individual, we sort of think, well, who do I want to be in this next year? Who do I want to be? What do I want to be doing differently? And thinking about myself, what do I know of my strengths? What do I know that of the real self and my ideal self, where their strengths are the same? So the ideal self is who I want to be. And I often use this with leaders. So the leader, what is the leader I want to be? And working with a bunch of teachers last week, they were saying that, well, I just want to be a more confident leader. That's who I want to be. By the end of this year, I want to be more confident. And we started to look at, well, what strengths have you got at the moment? Where you are confident, where are you confident? And where do you feel less confident? What are the gaps that you experience? So that sense of the ideal, and then the discrepancy between the real and the ideal, becomes the learning agenda. It becomes the thing that that you focus on to change. And in making a change, Boyatzis really encourages people to experiment and practice. And in order to do that really well, he also recommends that you have people to spur you on, and those people are your trusted relationships. Those people who will pick up the phone and say, how are you doing? Just tell me how it's gone. Yeah, I'm happy to talk through this with you. Those are the people who would be your trusted relationships. So let's just have a look at how that works. I would urge you at the moment to just be thinking if there's something that is a bit of an itch. By that I mean something that just feels a bit uncomfortable and you would really like to make it different. Think of something that is well within your control, nothing that is outside of your control, because that at the moment is not necessarily helpful. But if you think of something where there's a discrepancy between what your ideal would be and what is actually going on at the moment, the real self, and focus on that. Then need to look in the mirror and see where the strengths and gaps actually are. And then to begin to change, to plan your learning and your behaviours, and think about how you're going to experiment. As you experiment with something new, you begin to strengthen those neural pathways, and those new behaviours become established. And then who are the people that you can get to support you and to encourage you and spur you on? So for this, I'm going to just take you through a reflection, a guided reflection. And you'll see the same slide coming up, but each slide that comes up has a different question. And I'm just going to take you through this as an individual. I would urge you to have at hand a pen and paper, just to jot down your personal reflections and your thoughts as we do this. So what do you most need to do to help you walk the road ahead? Where are you feeling that itch? Where are you feeling there is something that could be different, that you would like to make different? Think of just one area in your life that you'd like to change, and it has to be within your control. Where's your focus? What would it look like if you made a change to that? What's your vision? What would you see or hear or feel that would be different to now? How could you make a start or take the first step? What actions can you take? Who could help or encourage you? And then just think, how committed are you to making that change? You might want to score it as a score of in between 1 and 10, 10 being absolutely, I'm definitely going to do it, and 1 being, well, it's a nice idea, but not really sure. And then think, what would it take to move the score from a low score up towards 10? What else is needed? I don't know where you get your support from and your light from, but just be thinking about where your spiritual senses, where do you draw your energy and your encouragement that's outside of your own resources? And I love this. I love this this slide and that sense of the sun streaming down on the path. And I think for all of us, we have things that lift our eyes, but also help us to see more clearly. And then finally, in terms of what might work for you, there's some superb tips on this. Some of them are mine, but most of them come from the NHS, which is how to manage change and coronavirus. The link is on the bottom of the slide. There's lots of resources there that refer to mental health and well-being. And I just recommend that to you. But just that sort of sense of how do you maintain that positive sense of walking through this time, that mindfulness of knowing how you're feeling, focusing on the present, celebrating what's going well, giving thanks, maybe jotting down in a journal what you're thankful for, finding a rhythm or structure that works, finding people who sustain you, getting out of the house and enjoying the world around, relaxing. I've taken up new activities. I've started doing jigsaws again. I haven't done them since I did them with my children. But notice the things that give you joy and also how you bless others. I think I'm going to hand back to Sarah, but just finally say thank you very much for letting me inhabit your space and maybe just giving you some pause for thought during the day. So thank you.